So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your interest in chatbots and for attending our webinar. My name is Bahram Asadolazadeh, and I'm presenting today with my colleague Gerrit Denayer regarding chatbots and how you can use chatbots to enhance the digital customer experience for your customers. Just some housekeeping things first. During the presentation, we will have a live demo, and within the presentation, we also have poll questions for you so that we understand a little bit better your background with chatbots, if you have already used them or not. So please look out for the polls. You can quickly answer them, and that gives us good context during the webinar. In addition, please be aware that you're automatically muted, and you can pose questions to us via the chat function, and we will review these after the presentation, and we try to have 15 minutes left at the end of the presentation to go through the questions and answer them. Okay, so with that, I would like to welcome you and start. So the agenda for today's webinar is we'll give you a very brief introduction to business and decision, so you know who you're dealing with. Then we'll discuss the business case behind chatbots, what you can do with them. And I will then pass on to my colleague who will really say what chatbots are, what they're not, what you can expect. We'll talk about some reference cases from our customers and tell you what it takes to get started. So regarding business and decision, we are a business intelligence and system integration consulting company in 11 countries. We have more than 2,400 diverse experts with various technical and business skills that help our customers. And last year we did more than 200 million euros in revenue. We are part of Orange Business Services and the Orange Group, which, as you may know, is involved in telecommunication, all the way from collecting data, transporting data, storing data. And we close the loop at Business and Decision for Orange Business Services by making sure the data you're able to analyze the data and get the insights you need, share them with your team or with external partners to be able to adapt and move business forward. From a positioning point of view, in consulting companies, there are really three areas. There's management consulting that is really focused on from a management side and business consulting. There are system integrators who are involved with solution architecture, IT design, testing, and actually running applications for you. We position ourselves in the middle. So we don't typically do management consulting, we provide business consulting, and we typically don't run solutions for you. You run them usually yourself, but we are focused on the sweet spot. So we like to say we are more implementation oriented than management consultants, and we are more business oriented than system integrators. In Switzerland, you can find us at 3 locations, in Zurich, in Bern, and in Geneva. And so that's it regarding business and decision. If you have more questions, we can get to them afterwards. So what is the business case for chatbots? Why are we talking about them? The primary thing is that with competition increasing in the world, supply is usually not the problem. We have now a situation where supply is a problem, but that's something temporarily. Usually supply is easy to deal with and is global. Therefore, products and services have become increasingly similar. There's a quote from a professor and the dean of strategy at Harvard Business School. She said, "Today we have more of everything, more brands, more products, more choices, but it all feels like more of the same, a great big blur of similarity." And if you do some searches on the internet, for example, if you say I want to buy a smart TV, this is what you get, right? A lot of choice that is not really very differentiated. And the focus, when you have little differentiation, it always is on price, which is not the best thing for companies. Here's another example. So when you go to the supermarket, you want to choose something, it's really difficult because there are a ton of products that are basically doing the same thing. And really differentiation is taking more and more the role of being able to provide a better customer experience is becoming more and more important. And that's what customers want, right? They place more and more value on the experience. They want you to be available 24/7. When they have questions, they want instant responses in a qualitative way. They prefer self-service instead of telephone calls for most topics. And the world is moving towards messaging. Instead of having different apps that you need to install, going through forms and emails and FAQs, they want to have conversations, right? You can see that when you look at some of the statistics. So for example, these are the number of Amazon Alexa compatible devices. So this is not the install base. The install base is much higher. These are the different types of devices that support Amazon Alexa. You can see how fast it is growing. And Facebook, the leading messaging company with Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, has now almost 3 billion monthly active users on its services. So there's no denying, these people are not lying. They want to use these kind of stuff. So as businesses, we need to be able to position ourselves accordingly. In addition, we also have the challenge from a cost perspective. There's pressure for efficiency, right? Management wants to do more business with the same resources, or ideally with reduced resources, right? And customer service, because of this pressure on efficiency, is often limited to only after-sales service, and then it's in the form of email. A lot of time phone numbers are hidden because a lot of companies say we can't really deal with all the phone calls. And when phone numbers are visible, they're usually limited to office hours, right? And this is really not the expectation that customers have today. So this is exactly the business case for chatbots. This is how they're going to help. And to tell you more about them, my colleague Gerrit, who is our chatbot expert, will take you through, show you what they are, what they're not, what you can expect, and share reference cases. Gerrit?
Thanks, Varun, for the introduction. Welcome as well from my end into this event and this webinar. I'd like to take a minute here to, first of all, clarify a little bit what a chatbot is and what it is not, and to demystify what it's all about. First of all, I think it's very important to understand that a chatbot is not a magical box that does everything for you. There is basically, it's a new way of interacting with the backend system. We used to type commands on a prompt a long time ago in the 80s. Then we switched to a Windows application. Then we switched to web and to mobile apps. And now chat and NLP and voice communications is just the next natural step to interact with backend systems. This being said, it's very easy as well to position that what the chatbot really does is just an interface into another application, into something else. What I typically want to do is I want to make two big distinctions in between chatbots, because I know many people do have experience with chatbots, and maybe this is a good place to launch a poll actually, to just get your feedback. Let me do it quickly. So if you can just, just quick question, have you used a chatbot before, personally or professionally? We just have this quick poll up there for 30 seconds or so. So it's completely anonymous. So we just want to have some feedback there. So if you can put in your suggestions, that would be good. So what I was saying is there is two large categories what chatbots do in my vision. First of all, there is the interface to a backend system that is a transaction, much what you can do on a form type of application in an app or a web environment. and there is lookup into information or into recurring questions. Let's look at them one by one to see what they are and what they're not. If you look to the first category of chatbots, which is the transactional type of chatbot, it's typically something that is scripted. And here the example, or the classical example is, for instance, if you want to book an airline ticket to fly to Barcelona or to another location. Now, maybe taking a ticket on an airplane is not what is on your mind today, given circumstances, but it's a very nice example to showcase this. So if I want to book a flight to Barcelona, I can interact with a chatbot and saying, I'm looking for a ticket to Barcelona for next week for me and my wife. What this then does, and in the meantime, there is a second poll that we're interested in to get your feedback from. What this does then is the chatbot will analyze the question you're asking to identify what you really want to do. Interesting to see that most people don't like chatbots so far. 50-50, it's interesting. I'm looking at the votes while being responded. It's okay, it's about equal. Okay, that's good. So let's switch back to the, yes, thank you, to the session here, yes. So if I put the intent in, looking for a ticket is, the goal of this chatbot. And then there's a couple of variants or variables that I'm filling in to Barcelona next week and me and my wife. And the chatbot will actually recommend that, and it will see, okay, so I have using this chat, I understand now that I'm at to fly to Barcelona next week and it's for 2 people. So today +7 and my location. Because this is typically a transaction type of bot, the intent will be recognized and says, okay, for actually completing this transaction, I need additional information. I need the source, where are you flying from? How long are you staying next week? Do you have any luggage to take with you? And do you need insurance? So there is a certain script that will be invoked that will analyze whatever you have set already, and then prompt you in a conversational way to add additional content into that transaction. The NLU, which stands for Natural Language Understanding, will make sure that whenever you say something like next week or tomorrow or me and my wife or yes and no, that it actually recognizes those and it will do the right things behind the scene to complete the transaction. Now, these chatbots, they're very scripted and they're developed, and let me explain a little bit more about those. Suppose that in this conversation, at a certain point in time, the chatbot will ask, do you want to have insurance, travel insurance? Then the user says, instead of just saying yes or no, the question can be, well, what is covered by your insurance? Now you're switching intent, you're switching conversation, and you're going from I'm looking for a ticket to a next conversation to which says what is covered by travel insurance. And in those type of conversation, this is just a one-level context, but you can have multiple levels of hierarchies where from one conversation you switch to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. But ultimately, at the end, you want to complete this transaction. So you have to maintain the context all over these different intents and over these questions. So when you're ultimately coming back to the initial question, that you can complete this transaction. As you can easily understand, this is a very complex thing to maintain, and in very simple cases, it doesn't do that. But it very quickly goes into a deep level of conversation. Someone needs to maintain that, and there needs to be a very thoughtful way of working on this type of script. So at the end, when you say, okay, I want to book my flight, that you have all the information that spawn off in different conversations are put together and put into the transaction. So these type of chatbots, they have a couple of things that which are very important. First of all, they're scripted, which invokes. Let me move to the next slide here. Yes. So they're what is called transactional chatbots. Typical things that you have on transactional chatbots is there are a limited number of questions you can ask. There's a number of transactions you can do. And if we go back to the airplane example, it's, I need to cancel my flight, I want to book my flight, I want to reschedule my flight. So there's a handful of things that this chatbot can do. The other thing which is very typical for these transactional chatbots is there is a high level of conversation. There's typically many questions and answers and a high level of understanding that each time you respond to those questions, the chatbot needs to interpret it. So there is the machine learning which is behind, or the NLU which is behind, needs to be very elevated to make sure that whatever you're responding, the chatbot understands it and can respond into the needed, so the right transaction or the needed values to put into the transaction. And as I said, these type of chatbots, typically you need some chatbot specialist developers, or at least some very experienced people to set up these bots, to maintain those bots, specifically because there's a lot of integration into backend systems. If you're putting a chatbot in front of a air booking ticket, that means that somehow once you have captured all this information, you probably need to invoke some APIs or some REST calls or some transaction in the backend to do the transaction. In the situation that everything works well, this is easy. Suppose that in the meantime, your flight is overbooked or there's a change, there's another conversation that needs to spawn off to do an alternative. So this is really application development. And although the conversation flow might be very simple to set up, typically this is a rather complex type of application that a chatbot can do. A other way of working with chatbots, and which we actually more talking here in more details today, it's the chatbots that help people responding to questions. It's typically FAQ related recurring questions on the support side, where you're trying to support people, whether it be internal people, employees with recurring questions, or they are customers, or they are agents, or any type of question that is frequently recurring that you want to channel off, that you want to have consistent type of answering. You can use those chatbots as well, because they're very easy to put in questions and answers. And then you have things like, where can I find your office? If you put like an example that could show later on, if you're in a tourist environment and you want to show the person, where can I find a tourist office? Or in a banking environment where you say, hey, what are your opening hours? Let's take this example of opening hours. Where can I find your office? There's obviously a certain level of conversation needed to respond correctly to this answer, to this question as well. If someone asks me what are your opening hours, it's very well possible that I need to pop up with a question saying, okay, what type of service are you looking for? If we think of a banking environment, is it a private bank or personal bank or an investment bank, or you're looking for insurance? And depending on those answers, you propose another answer. But that's about it. It's a very limited number of conversation, depth of conversation, which is in there. Another thing is, do I need insurance for an e-bike? Well, this is a very straightforward example where you can say yes or no, depending on some conditions. And we'll drill into that in a minute or so. But also it can dig into backend systems. How many vacation days have I left till the end of the year? It's still a recurrent question. It's not a real transaction, but you can do a lookup into an HRM system, for instance, to respond to this question. So you can unload your HR people in having this type of conversation automated by a chatbot. So these chatbots, they're typically supported by business users. They're created by business users, and there's some other type of knowledge points. I see there is a typo in the slide there. This is not transactional chatbot, obviously, but a recurring questions chatbot, so an FAQ chatbot. So typically you see here that there is much more questions. In the transactional bots, you typically have a handful of questions. It can be 5, 10, 100 maximum, something like that, not much more. In transactional chatbot, in conversational chatbots on FAQs, you'll see that you'll have maybe thousands or 10,000 of questions, even typically in multiple languages, on which you can respond to. The level of conversation is non-existing or limited. So you ask the question, and the bot will say, again, think of the e-bike example. Do you insure an e-bike? Then the question will be, okay, does it go faster than 25 kilometers per hour? Yes or no? And then depending on that response, the bot will give you the correct answer. So the level of conversation between the user and the backend system, the automated system, is rather limited. The other thing is that the focus there is not on the transaction integration with the backend system, but the focus on knowledge sharing and knowledge management. So many questions can be answered by many people that today, instead of picking up the phone or answering emails, they will be able and capable of putting information into a knowledge system that then can be found by or exploited by a chatbot to ease off the number of repeating questions that come in. And I think we're going to talk briefly about it at the end of the presentation as well. If you look at the current situation where we have, the corona and the COVID situation, there's many people asking questions on, should I go back to work? How can I back to work? What about meetings? What about rescheduling of events? So there's a bunch of questions coming in nowadays, specifically towards COVID. But this is just one use case. There any corporation where there is, a potentially large user community will have a repetitive number of questions coming in. And the challenge here often is to find the right tool for your implementation. So a chatbot is not a chatbot. It really depends on what you want to implement with it and what the use case is. One of the things that I see a lot when I'm talking about chatbots, and certainly when we behind the first level of the chatbot, people say, but I can do the same with search. Well, not exactly. Let me give you an example, and let's go back to the insurance of an e-bike. If I would say, on Google, this is just an example. If I say, insurance e-bike, which is typically what you would do, the first thing you'll notice, you'll get something like, okay, I found 169 million results in 0.61 seconds. Well, I'm sure none of us will be able to evaluate these 159 million results within the next couple of hours. So you'll get something like this, and then you are now the intelligent person that needs to find within this, lot of information, this mass volume of responses to find what you're actually looking for. This is what search typically does. And search is a good thing if you're investigating things, if you're in research, if you have a bunch of questions, you really don't know what to look for, search is a really good application to use. And we're all familiar with it. Now, NLP and chatbots, they work in another way because they really want to respond to a question. So if the question would be, do I need insurance for an e-bike? The bot can say, okay, that depends on what type of e-bike do you have. Does it provide support for speed over 24 kilometers an hour? And then you respond to that. And then the bot will say, okay, this is what you're looking for. And yes, you have to, at least in the territory where I live in. And it can even prompt you for the next best action. So it will say, okay, so now you know this. What else do you want to know? Do you want to buy an insurance? Do you want to know how to insure it? Do you know if you can insure it, what the conditions are? What type of contracts do we offer that includes speed bike insurances, etc. So the way of engagement with your user is completely different. At this point, you know exactly what the user is looking for. In the search, you don't. You just get a list of potential documents where something can be related to insurance and e-bikes. So the analytics as well that you find out of those, if you implement a search or a chatbot in your website, is a lot different, because on the left-hand side on the search, you really never know what the user was looking for. You just knew that there were some keyword searches, but there's not really, first of all, there's no way to identify if the question was responded and if the question that was responded was successful or not. In a chatbot environment, and you can see at the bottom of the screenshot there, you will have things like feedback tools where you can do thumbs up, thumbs down to make sure that whenever you respond something, the user has the opportunity to respond to that and say, hey, I don't really like your answer, it's wrong, you didn't understand my question, and you can make sure that for the next iteration of that question, your system gets smarter, and for the next user, you get a better response. Let's take two use case examples that we implemented recently, and both are completely different. One is a transactional system, and the other one is about the knowledge management system. So a very nice example. Oh, that's a good question, actually. A very nice example that we can do here in the live cases is, instead of booking a ticket, is we had a customer that was looking for optimizing his workforce and automating the booking of meeting rooms. In the meantime, there is another poll coming up. So, if you could give some feedback on this, that would be nice. So do you have currently a chatbot or live chat implementation? So we can, good to see how many people actually are already in the stage of engaging better and more with their users, whether it be a customer or internal customer or an employee. So a nice example of a transactional chatbot that is really an application is something we implemented for a large pharmaceutical company, where their site in Belgium had over 400 meeting rooms. And as you can imagine, if you have 400 meeting rooms, it's not easy to find the meeting room that you need. You would guesstimate, or you would estimate that always a meeting room would be available. So if I need to book a meeting room for the 4 of us for tomorrow, and I need a conference system, I can go in Outlook and try to find a meeting room. Or I can use a solution like a chatbot where I just say, hey, I need a meeting room for tomorrow for 4 people. And then I engage in a conversation with that bot that will say, okay, so do you need a conference system? How long will the meeting take? And it will actually go out and search for a meeting room and make that reservation for you. Now, in this particular example, we even did some more intelligence, and we implemented integration with an IoT system where we put motion sensors into the meeting rooms to see if the meeting rooms were actually occupied or not. So instead of just doing the booking, it gave a couple of additional options. First of all, if I say I need a meeting room for tomorrow for 4 people at 10, and there is no meeting room available, it will say, well, I don't find anything that matches your criteria, but this is a new match. So I can do a meeting room that's maybe a little bit further away on a different floor, or I can do a meeting room at 10:30, or I have a meeting room for 6 people. Is that okay for you as well? And you don't have to search for it. So there's a large time saver in having the system finding the best alternative for you. And that alternative can be, again, smart, so it learns over time what your preferences are. The other thing that we implement in this chatbot, in this application, I should say, that it's funded with a chatbot, is a system that if you allocate a meeting room and you leave the meeting room after a certain time, the motion sensor will detect no one is there. It will automatically deallocate the meeting room. So it's available for someone else to use that room. Or you make a request for a meeting room at 10. At 10:05, the motion sensors see that there is still no one in the meeting room. Automatically, you'll get the notifications with the chat system saying, hey, you booked the room, you're not there, you have another 5 minutes, or we'll cancel the meeting room so it's available for another user to use. Because face it, many people have issues finding meeting rooms in offices nowadays. So this is a very nice implementation of, again, a transactional bot where typically people, it helps doing a transaction. It's not booking a flight. This time it's booking a meeting room, but it can do a very intelligent thing, and it has a high level of integration with backend systems. It's the calendar booking system, and in this case as well, an IoT device, or IoT devices, I should say, where it captures information of the actual presence within the meeting room. The other use case I would like to talk about with the other extreme is the use case of Belfius. Let me see if I can get control of this presentation again. Yes. So Belfius is the #3 bank and insurer in Belgium, where we implemented a chatbot for agent support. They had a couple of challenges, which we'll go into detail in the next couple of slides, and I'm watching time here, so I'm maybe going to skip this slide because we're going to go into more details in a second here. So they actually had a couple of challenges. The #1 challenge they had is that marketing was planning a marketing campaign to aggressively attack the market to do more contracts on car insurance. So they really had a focus in incrementing the production level. But the constraint they had is they could not have more people in the back office to support this incremental market. So basically they want to do more with less or the same people or the same staff. The staff already had a backlog of a couple of days of work on the current workload. So if they want to increment with an aggressive strategy in acquiring more customers, they would face a huge challenge. The other thing that was very important at that moment, not only marketing had planned a very aggressive campaign, secondly, IT, they just decided to roll out a new back office platform for implementing the insurances. So not only would there be more questions on the car insurance itself, but also there would be questions on how do I do this now in this new application. So they had 2 additional challenges. So they were anticipating a lot of support from the back office into their agent network to see how can I now do this new, how can I book new insurances in this new platform. The next challenge that we're facing is because they have an agent network, basically bank offices throughout the country, where consumers like you and I could just go in and ask for a car insurance or ask questions. The agent in the middle, the director of the agency, he was not specifically skilled or allowed to respond to all questions. So if I would ask, can I insure my son, my 17-year-old son, with a temporary permit or my company car? Well, that guy could not and may not answer that question. He should check with the back office to see if that's something they can do. Now, the agencies typically they work from the customer-facing agents. They align their business hours to the consumers, meaning they are open in the evenings and in the weekends. But the back office they work from 9 to 5. So if you had a question outside the regular time frame, you had to send an email, and the response times on the emails were slow. So there's a service level agreement that was about 7 days. And if you would call the back office during working hours, the average waiting time to someone pick up the phone was 7 minutes because of the workload, which is not easy or not a good way to work. If you have a customer in front of you and then you have for a simple question, you have to wait 7 minutes in the back office before someone picks up the phone. The other thing they measured is not only the wait times, how long you were on hold before someone picks up the phone, but also the duration of the conversation. So how long did it take to answer that question? And many of the conversations, about 40% of the conversations, the time of the answer, the time of the conversation took less than 2 minutes. Now I challenge you to see how much questions and answers and greetings you can do in 2 minutes, but that typically means that those questions were very easy to answer. So they had to find a way to cope with those easy questions, and that the agents in the middle, they could easily respond themselves to that question, and the back office agents, they only had to answer more complex questions. The third challenge that we're facing, let me go to the next slide here. Baram, I think you're in control of the mouse now.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. So the third challenge that we're facing is that from an organizational point of view, there were many sources of knowledge. People had information on the extranet, on the intranet, on the SharePoint. Obviously, they could ask questions to colleagues over the phone. They had a bunch of emails where they had already some questions and answers. They shared newsletters and documentation on new things, new products, things. There were folders, there were knowledge bases. So there was a lot of things that had some information. And for the user, it was very hard to find a consistent way of answering a question, because the information was updated so frequently and so often that it's not always a single point where you could find this information. So keeping that, first of all, for the user to find this information was hard. Secondly, for the back office, it was very hard to maintain all those different sources of information. So they found it very hard to give consistent and good answers to the questions that came in. We implemented an FAQ chatbot about a year and a half ago in this environment, and I can share some results where we are today with this project, and we're still engaged with them, and we see that more and more people and more projects are actually onboarding in this chatbot. But for the initial project that we started off with and on which we have the best and the most numbers so far, on the car insurance, they have 25% increase on insurances. So the production went up with 25%. And if we compare the number of calls that came in, they decreased by 40%. So if you would put those two together, you can say easily that the charge in the back office decreased by over 50%. The other thing that we're constantly measuring is how well am I doing? So, the first time right or the first time answer that we see if the response was correct. The bot today is on a level of over 94%. So it's plus 90 overall, first time right. But actually, we're 94% of the questions today are automatically answered by the chatbot correctly. The way we measure that is very simple. Each time we have a question that is wrongly answered, we can see it in the reporting by thumbs down or by a follow-up question that is not clear. We can easily measure to see if the bot was correct or not to the initial question. Another time consumer was obviously the emails, because people, they were sending emails, and an email is a free format text where you can have many questions in one, which is a huge time consumer to get good responses to. After implementing the chatbot, they've seen a decrease of the emails by 20%, which is a huge time saver as well. So not only over phone they got less questions, but also by email there was an email drop of 20%, which was a tremendous money saver and return of investment. The service levels were very important as well to monitor. Obviously, the chatbot is available 24/7, and we see a lot of activity in the evenings and in after hours and during the weekends that are automatically answered by the bot, which caused the average waiting time to drop below 2 minutes. So we were over 7 minutes. Now the average waiting time are below 2 minutes. And also the conversations that the agents in the back office now are having are longer. So the duration is not extremely long, but we see a large increase of the duration, which means that the conversation actually needs some more knowledge and needs some more intelligence, and they're harder questions. So some more seniority is needed to respond to those questions. We also offloaded some of the escalation from email to an implemented ticketing system, which is included in the chatbot. So it does some first monitoring and filtering, and if it doesn't know the answer, a ticket is opened. Now, within the ticketing system, we implemented structures, so it's very easy to respond to tickets, and the back office prioritizes these tickets as well. So on email, the service level agreements are 7 days. On tickets, the service level agreements are 4 hours. That means that within the day, typically within half a day, if you have a question that came in through the chatbot, within half a day, you have the answer. If you send it by email, it can be a week before you have the answer. So people are prioritizing the chatbot, and we see the usage incrementally growing week over week over week. The numbers you see here of the usage, they dated a couple of weeks ago. I can tell you before the COVID and confinement situation, the number of questions that came in, or the number of users per week were exceeding 1,500. And we started, by the way, by implementing only 60 questions in 3 agencies. So we had 20 users to start with. So now we see that virtually anyone within the bank is using it on an average of 1,500 users a week. And we see that over 5,000, again, these numbers are a little outdated. We answer over 5,000 questions a week automatically by the chatbot, which is a tremendous success. From an organizational point of view, as they had many sources of information today, they are limited to 2 sources of information. There is the knowledge base of the chatbot, which is a conversational knowledge base, and where the idea is, so as fast as possible, respond to the question that was asked by the user. But sometimes you need a procedure where technical answers, so they still maintain a technical library where the chatbot points to for more complete answering. So if someone asks, how can I ask a duplicate license plate? Then it says in the chatbot a very short answer, and it will point you and do you have more? Do you want the full procedure? Click here, and then it points you to the location on SharePoint or to the PDF where actually the full procedure on how to do this procedure.
Garrett,
yes.
Sorry, I'm watching the time a little bit. We have 20 minutes left.
Sure. This is slide, and then I'll hand it over back to you, Baram. So we started off the project with 60 questions onto just a limited number of agencies and on 1 product. Today we are live with 12 products, and we have over 7,000 questions that can be answered automatically per language. And I'm living in Belgium, so we have 2 languages, so that the chatbot closely responds to 15,000 questions over 2 languages. We do a lot of measuring, so KPIs and measuring of the KPIs and see if you're doing well. It's very important in this project. One of the things that the bank itself does, so Belfius does, is they have a yearly survey within their user base to see, how well do we support you? What is the best innovation? What's the best service, etc. And in 2018, it was rated top 3. In 2019, and those numbers came only in last week. That's why it's not in the slide yet. Last for the review of last year, it's actually voted #1 innovation. So as the user base grows and the user community grows, we see that there is much more adoption and people like it. And the most frequently asked question we're getting today in the chatbot is, when will we onboard more products and when will be available for a larger set of questions and answers in the product. During the project, the chatbot is not an isolated thing. It has to be included in your workflow. Into change management is very important as well. So as I said before, we implemented ticketing over email. We also implemented live chat. So when a question is unanswered, depending on the type of question and the availability of the live agent, we escalate to live agent depending on the value of the questions, for instance. But the live agent then gets through the same channel from the consumer, from the user. It gets all the information and the background information that was already asked through the chatbot. So it has the journey can just continue in the same channel. And it's very important to keep on going in the same conversation. So they escalate now to live chat, which we, for next year in the internal survey, I'm really curious to see what it'll do in the results there. But what I see now, it's highly adopted and people like it a lot. I'm not going to show those. You have the presentation available for you after the session, and then you can see some additional gains that they're having. That it's a very highly successful implementation. One of the implementations, because we have a couple of them. I already touched COVID challenges. I think it's a very nice use case, and with this, it's not about COVID at all, but it's a very nice use case. I think if you want to help your HR environment or your customer in answering all the questions and the tidal wave that will come in on questions on what's next on relaunching the economy and all the events that were canceled and rescheduling, etc. I think the chatbot is a very nice use case in giving that, and this is how chatbots can help. It's a little bit of a summary on what we just discussed before. One of the things that I don't touch too much, but we're a data-driven company. The insights you get out of each chatbot, they're a high value. So there's a lot of measuring that needs to be done, and fine tuning, making your KPIs, make sure your escalation management is correct, and capture your feedback. Will make sure that you're in success in your implementation. Baram, I'll hand it over to you. And in the meantime, maybe it's a good time while you prepare for the demo. That's what we launch the next poll.
Thank you very much, Gary. So while you are engaged with the next poll, what we also wanted to show you is what a chatbot feels like when it's implemented, a demo, so that you see live and get a hands-on experience what this chatbot looks like. So in this case, for the live demo, we chose to show you a chatbot implemented for a tourist office, for example, for the city of Zurich, and some typical questions that come up repeatedly when somebody is going to visit the city like Zurich. We'll show you how the chatbot can respond to those, and you get an impression of the different kinds of questions and answers that the chatbot can provide. So see, is the poll already closed and is my screen visible? Garrett, could you let me know?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, Baram, you can go ahead.
Okay, so you can see my screen. So this is the city, and the chatbot can be implemented in multiple channels. In this case, we implemented it just on the website of zurich.com.de. So it's a demo that's running on that website right now. You won't see it, it's running on my computer, but obviously if you wanted to implement it for the city of Zurich, then it would be available on their webpage. So in here, because everybody, I think all the participants are German speaking, I will actually do the demo in German. But I think if somebody's English speaking, you can still follow. Was eine sehr schöne Möglichkeit ist, ist natürlich bei einem Chatbot gleich eine Begrüßung zu haben. der auch die Erwartungen managt, dass man sagt, okay, was kann man hier erwarten von diesem Chatbot? Wie Sie sehen, hier steht, dass dieser Chatbot zu Sehenswürdigkeiten in Zürich Fragen beantworten kann. Und wenn die Antworten nicht gegeben werden können, dass der Chatbot kontinuierlich hinzulernen wird. Weiterhin werden die meistgestellten Fragen der Woche zum Beispiel oder des Monats gezeigt. Das erleichtert für die Anwender oder diejenigen, die Fragen haben, den Einstieg zu dem Chatbot. Das heißt, bevor Sie überhaupt eine Frage formulieren müssen, könnten Sie zum Beispiel sagen, was kann ich in Zürich machen? Und so sehen Sie schon, wie der Chatbot antworten kann. Ja? Hier finden Sie Zürichs Top-Sehenswürdigkeiten. Hier ist eine Liste mit Bildern von den Sehenswürdigkeiten, die zur Verfügung stehen. Und wenn man jetzt zum Beispiel sagt, okay, mich interessiert Großmünster, kann man hier noch auf mehr Infos klicken und der Chatbot kann weitere Kontextinformationen hierzu liefern. Ja? Jetzt könnte man sagen, eine Frage stellen, wann wurde es gebaut? Und der Chatbot versteht, dass wir jetzt momentan im Kontext sind vom Großmünster, von dieser Kirche und weiß, wo man nachgucken muss und antwortet, dass das ja circa im Jahr 1100 erbaut wurde. Ja. Ich kann aber auch weiter nach oben gehen und sagen, jetzt interessiere ich mich mehr für die Natur, ich möchte mehr über den Zürichsee erfahren. Dann kann man natürlich Bilder integrieren, man kann Videos integrieren und Texte. Jetzt könnte ich auch fragen, wie groß ist der? Und ich bekomme eine Antwort, wie viele Quadratkilometer groß der Zürichsee ist. Solche Informationen, die werden auch in Datenbanken oder in Tabellen abgelegt, sodass dass man einfach nur die Tabelle ergänzen muss, erweitern muss und damit sehr viele Fragestellungen, sehr viele Attribute über die verschiedenen Sehenswürdigkeiten in diesem Fall beantworten kann. Was können wir noch machen? Wir könnten zum Beispiel fragen, wenn man neu ist in einer Stadt, will man ja auch wissen, wie man herumkommen kann. Also könnte ich sagen, wie kann ich in Zürich oder wie kann ich Zürich erkunden? Könnte eine Frage sein. Und da sehe ich jetzt, es gibt verschiedene Möglichkeiten. Ich kann den öffentlichen Verkehr benutzen, kann da draufklicken, mehrere Informationen bekommen. Ich sehe auch, zu Fuß lässt sich Zürich auch gut erkunden. Bekomme dazu einen Text. Schiffe oder Boote, wenn das Wetter mitspielt, ist das doch eine tolle Idee. Ich habe Bilder, ich kann auch sogar draufklicken. Da kann also auch andere Sachen, zum Beispiel eine Verbindung zum Fahrplanassistenten, wo ich die Route und Fahrpreise und Tickets kaufen kann, integriert werden. Sie sehen also eine sehr reichhaltige Möglichkeit, die Konversation zu führen. Jetzt ich brauche einen Stadtführer oder einen Guide. Fragen wir das doch mal. Ich möchte einen Guide buchen und da sehen Sie auch schon, das Bot ist eigentlich liest mit, was man machen möchte und da kommt auch schon die Frage, jetzt kann ich die auswählen. Ja, fragt mich jetzt der Bot, ob ich mehr als 10 Personen habe, für die ich einen Guide brauche und da sage ich jetzt nein, weniger als 10 Personen und dann ist das wie eine Kaskade, dann geht es einfach weiter und das ist halt der große Unterschied zu einer Suchmaschine, dass ich hier geführt werde in meinem Gespräch. Ja? Dann kann ich sagen, okay, für wann brauche ich das? Dann sage ich, für heute brauche ich einen Guide. Und da ist es besser, wenn ich anrufe. Oder wenn ich für später brauchen würde, könnte ich eine Nachricht verschicken mit meinen Informationen, wann ich das suche, was ich sehen möchte, meine E-Mail angeben und würde eine Antwort bekommen. Gut. Also das sind mal Möglichkeiten, was könnte man noch fragen? Jetzt im Kontext von Covid-19 könnte man natürlich auch fragen, was hat denn überhaupt in Zürich geöffnet? Und dort bekomme ich jetzt eine Antwort, dass viele Sachen untersagt sind, ja, was geschlossen ist und ein Link zum Schweizerischen Bundesamt, wo ich nähere Informationen herausfinden kann. Interessanterweise, als ich das jetzt für die Seite von Zürich.com erstellt habe, die haben eine Chatmöglichkeit mit einer mit einer menschlichen, also wirklich mit einer Person, nicht mit einem Bot. Und ich habe die Person gefragt, was man Sportliches machen kann. Und die Person scheint nicht eine Sportlerin gewesen zu sein, konnte mir eigentlich relativ wenig Auskunft geben. Und da habe ich das eigentlich als Motivation genommen, um den Bot etwas anzureichern. Jetzt können wir den Bot zum Beispiel fragen, was kann ich Sportliches erleben? So, da bekomme ich nochmal Zürichsee als eine Möglichkeit, den Uetliberg, wo ich eine Wanderung machen kann, aber auch das FIFA World Football Museum mit einem Video integriert, das ich abspielen lassen kann. Und ich muss den Chatbot nicht verlassen. Sie sehen also wirklich reichhaltige Möglichkeiten, was man dort machen kann. Und wenn mal eine Frage kommt, und das ist sicherlich vorprogrammiert, dass da Fragen kommen werden, die nicht irgendwie in der Knowledge Base hinterlegt sind, zum Beispiel, wo kann ich meine Koffer lassen. Da sagt der Bot, okay, das kann ich jetzt nicht verstehen. Ja, also die Frage kann ich nicht beantworten. Haben Sie vollständige Fragen formuliert? Jetzt könnte ich die Frage nochmal, was mache ich mit meinen Koffern? Anders stellen. Und da sagt der Bot auch immer noch, tut mir leid, kann ich immer noch nicht beantworten. Möchten Sie ein Ticket öffnen oder mit einer Person sprechen? Jetzt in dieser Demo haben wir jetzt natürlich keine Person, die im Hintergrund den Chat bedient. Aber selbstverständlich kann man den Live-Chat integrieren und miteinander natürlich in Person sprechen oder chatten. Oder in diesem Fall kann man ein Ticket eröffnen und sagen, okay, das war eigentlich die Frage, die du nicht beantworten konntest, hier ist meine E-Mail-Adresse und so weiter. Und das habe ich im Voraus schon gemacht und zeige Ihnen, wie das dann aussieht. Das ist der Backend, sodass Sie auch wissen, als Unternehmen, was Sie machen. Da gibt es zum Beispiel die Dashboard-Funktion. Und wenn man dorthin guckt, da steht jetzt, wo kann ich meine Koffer lassen? Wenn ich da drauf klicke, dann sehe ich, ja, es gibt eigentlich zwei Fragestellungen, die eigentlich dasselbe sind. Da erkennt man auch sehr gut, dass der Chatbot verschiedentlich formulierte Fragen versteht und sagt, dass die eigentlich gleich sind. Und hier habe ich jetzt die Möglichkeit, die Auflösung ist jetzt ein bisschen groß, kann ich diese Frage beantworten und sagen, fix, ich möchte diese Frage beantworten. Und dort kann ich die Antwort schreiben, zum Beispiel Koffer können am Bahnhof in Schließfächer eingeschlossen werden. Da könnte ich jetzt weitere Links integrieren, wenn ich wollte, und das Ganze veröffentlichen. Wenn wir jetzt zurückgehen zum Chatbot, kann ich die Frage jetzt nochmal stellen, wo kann ich meine Koffer lassen? Und da sehen Sie schon die Antwort, die gepflegt wurde. Ja? Das heißt, diese Bots, die leben davon, dass man auch kontinuierlich guckt, was fragen die User tatsächlich an für Fragen und diese ergänzt. So hoffe ich, dass wir Ihnen einen Eindruck geben konnten, was so ein Chatbot oder wie so ein Chatbot sich anfühlt. Gut. Abschließend noch vielleicht unser Offering zu dem Thema Chatbots. Wenn Sie sagen, ja, das ist doch interessant, ich glaube, das ist für uns etwas, was wir ausprobieren möchten oder wo wir uns einen Business-Mehrwert vorstellen können. Was wir anbieten, ist ein Pilot, wo wir den Mehrwert von so einem Chatbot auch wirklich in Ihrem Use Case, bei Ihrem Business Case beweisen können innerhalb von 3 Monaten. Da drin inbegriffen sind eigentlich 5 Konversationsflüsse mit bis zu 100 Fragen und Antworten in einer Sprache. Eskalation ist mit inbegriffen und natürlich unterstützen wir Sie dabei via Consulting und Support, geben Ihnen das Training und Sie bekommen die Plattform für diese 3 Monate. Können Sie das nutzen und sagen, okay, ist der Business-Mehrwert für mich da oder nicht? Und jetzt habe ich auf Deutsch weitergemacht. Das wollte ich eigentlich auf Englisch machen. And if you see the value behind the 3 months pilot to the production. Okay, Gary, do you want to add something, or we have, I think, 5 minutes left?
No, it's good to just switch back to English, that's all.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was in the flow. Okay, but the slides are in English, so please apologize that one slide that I presented in German. The way to get started is to identify a simple use case to get your hands wet with it, get buy-in from the stakeholders who actually can say what the business value would be if you implement something that is very usable. Define the objectives, manage the expectations, do the pilot and measure the success based on some criteria like the consistency of responding to questions, the amount of backlog that you can reduce, the things that Gerrit showed also with the reference case that we have, and then you can have a business case to implement the project further. So I think with that, we thank you very much for your attention and are open for any questions you may have. We can look at the chat already to see.
While you think of any questions, you can put in the GoToWebinar control panel and ask into the webinar. Let's just go quickly over the poll results we have here. So the first question: have you used a chatbot so far, personally or professionally? We see that 80% of people already use chatbots. I think that's a good relative number. We see as well that over time, more and more people are using chatbots. More and more websites and applications have these chatbots enabled with different success, by the way, and that's something that we can see on the next question. So, did you like using the chatbots? Only 40% of people said yes, 60% said no. Now, we didn't have the time here to go into details, but I think it would be very good to know why not. So what was your experience with the chatbot and why was it negative? My experience from the field facing customers, so we typically see it's not a chatbot that is the problem. The chatbot is just a technology that supports, change management, that supports digitalization. And what is very important, which is one of the things that was in the slides before, is to get you started, is to identify a simple and a good structured use case. If you just implement an open chatbot, you have a large possibility that it's going to be a failure. So you really need to make sure that your use case is very specific, your target audience is very specific, and additionally, that you use and implement the right technology. And depends on what type of chatbot you're implementing. If we go back to the beginning of this session, if you're talking about a transactional chatbot in booking a meeting room or whatever, some kind of transaction you want to do, those chatbots, they typically are IT driven and they're built on conversational flows and on a high level of NLU and integration platforms. So it's a different type of platform and tool you need. If you compare that to the second thing we were showing, like the Zurich tourist information or the insurance type of implementation, where it's a knowledge-driven system where you have a lot of questions, thousands and thousands of questions that need to be supported, and where you typically have a business-driven use case. So if you want to mix that up and IT says, hey, we're going to put in a FAQ type of chatbot, you really need support from the business because IT will not respond to all of those questions. So, someone in the back office needs to be able to do that, to make sure that there's a follow-up on the ticketing, there's a follow-up on the chat, there's a follow-up on the questions that come in. So a chatbot is not a tool, it's just an enabler for digital transformation over time. And you need to make sure that you have and the business case and implement the right platform. And often I see that when people are not happy with the chatbot or with the result of the chatbot, something went wrong there. It's or the business case or the type of platform that was chosen wrong. Let's go over the next question here. Do you have currently a chatbot implemented? Everybody says no, which is, I think, a good use case, but then that means there is a lot of room for improvement and where we can help you to see if there is something we can identify and some KPIs maybe on your call center or operational KPIs that we can help you in making them better. And then the last question we had was, are you having trouble supporting internal or external questions? There, the answer is 1/3 says yes, 2/3 said no. Okay, so that means that today you have, you're already in shape for your current load of work. But keep in mind that, over time, there's going to be more and more digitalization. People are going to push to get more production and to get more operational things done. So there's two things you can do. You can scale up in your staff, or you can scale up in your digitalization. So that's a very important consideration to make in incrementing your business value. So these are the 4 polls we had. I did not see any questions come in. So if someone has a question, it's now the time. I'll hand it back to you, Bahram, as well, if you have anything to add.
No, thank you, Gerrit. I think we'll wait another minute to see if a question comes. And if not, I think you see right now on the contact slide our contact information. Please feel free to get in touch with us if you want to know more about chatbots, if you have any questions regarding what you saw, regarding references, or doing a demo. We'll be happy to help you, and also to help you from a business perspective to frame it correctly so that your chatbot project has a good chance of success. I don't see any questions so far, and thank you very much for attending this webinar, for your interest. Gary, thank you very much for presenting these cases, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.